Good evening, friends, and welcome to our nightly meditation practice. Thank you for joining me tonight. To begin with, we will pay homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Tonight I've decided to speak a little bit on the Buddha's teachings on the three elements of existence, or the three traits of existence. And those three traits are dukkha, or suffering, anatta, not self, and anicca, impermanence. So where do we go with that? In the Four Noble Truths, the first noble truth is there is suffering, and all sentient beings suffer. As the Buddha said in his Setting the Dharma Wheel in Motion Sutra, birth is suffering, life is suffering, death is suffering, old age is suffering. Everything that we do, every factor of life is suffering. And there's no way to avoid it. Sometimes dukkha is just defined as unsatisfactoriness, or perhaps it is defined as unhappiness, but we use the word suffering kind of in a generic sense, because when we are not satisfied with life, we are suffering. And that happens from the moment of birth on. That's, babies cry, old people die, young people die. There is always suffering in the world. Then there is anicca, which is impermanence. And impermanence is that the world, the universe, everything around us is always constantly changing. Even a mountain, which seems to be unchanging, as the wind blows, dust flies off the rocks, and slowly the mountain changes. Our lives change. Things come and go. Things arise, things fall. Everything in life is about impermanence. Nothing is permanent. Everything always changes. And thus, that is another truth of the trait of existence. So we have suffering in all existence. We have impermanence about everything in life, including ourselves. We're born young, we die old. Everywhere in between, there's change. And then finally, we have not self. And there's been a lot of discussion of not self, and I discussed not self not too long ago, just a couple of days ago. But the Buddha taught us to recognize that because of impermanence, because our minds are always changing, because our bodies are always changing, because our environment is always changing, we must recognize that when we have a feeling, it is impermanent, and that feeling itself is not us. When we have a sensation that we see something, even if it's something we like, that is not us. Our past is not us. The only us there is that present moment. So the Buddha taught this not self idea as a counter teaching, or a counter doctrine to the idea at the time that there is an eternal self, and that this person sitting in front of you will exist forever, whether it's a soul, whether it is reborn, reincarnated, they would say at the time of the Buddha's teachings. And so the Buddha taught against reincarnation. He did teach rebirth, but not reincarnation. Reincarnation would be the same person being born over and over and over. Rebirth is just the continuation of karma that continues to exist. And as those factors of karma lead through eons of time, there is rebirth, but not the same person. When I die and this karma that I carry with me is reborn, it will not be a Tom Daniels. It will not think the way I think. It will not see the things I see. It will not have the experiences that I have had that have created my current existence. And that's all the Buddha was teaching about non-self, is that not that there is not a self, there is a self in a skillful sense of understanding first person, second person, third person in a language vernacular. Of course there is a self, and I can talk about this is my body, this is my bald head. There is a self, but that self is not permanent. It is constantly changing, and it is not eternal. And all those things that, because they are changing, they represent a non-self. And that's what the Buddha taught. So these three characteristics of existence, that there's always suffering, there is always impermanence, and that there is always a non-self, are characteristics of every birth and death cycle in this chain of cycle of lives and birth and death that we call samsara. Those are the teachings of the Buddha, and they are intricately intertwined, interlinked into a suffering cycle. And so when we meditate, we seek to end suffering. We seek to understand, to gain wisdom and insight so that we can end our own suffering. When we have that bodhicitta mind, when we have that mind of becoming a Buddha to serve other people, we seek to serve them by helping alleviate their suffering. That's what we intend to do. And so we take these bodhisattva vows to attempt to create a desire in ourselves to continually, throughout this life and any other lives we may have, to teach other people how to attain their own relief from suffering. And we call that relief from suffering nirvana or enlightenment. So teaching other people how to alleviate suffering in their own lives is something that we all try to do when we teach the Dharma. And that's what I hope to be able to do as I sit and teach people how to meditate better. And the first step to meditating better is simply having a practice, simply setting a goal for ourselves that I will attempt to meditate, whether I meditate 5 minutes a day, 2 minutes a day, half hour a day, 2 hours a day. We set a goal for ourselves. And through meditation, through practice, we learn to dispel those illusions of permanence. We learn to dispel those illusions of self. And we gain wisdom and insight that ends suffering in our own lives. And then as we learn that, then we're better able to serve other people and teach them the same. And that's the reason why I have a meditation practice every night. And I try to share it with those of you who want to learn. So I hope that's helpful to you and teaching you that all we're trying to do is alleviate suffering. So that's my goal. And I hope that you too will have a similar goal, that alleviating your own suffering in life doesn't mean that we don't still have things that influence us and pains and normal experiences of life, it means that when we experience them with wisdom and without suffering. Things will still happen. Life will continue to change moment to moment. But if we have wisdom in how we approach it, then we don't allow it to let us suffer. Um, and there are some wonderful suttas on that, which perhaps we can share someday soon. The one that comes to mind to me is the stone splinter, where there's a sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya where the Buddha had it's called a stone splinter, but it seems to be it was a big shard of a rock that cut the Buddha's foot. And it was very painful for him. And yet, despite the pain, he didn't allow himself to suffer from it. He recognized that the pain was impermanent, the wound was impermanent. He addressed those pains and feelings that he still had, but he addressed them with wisdom through patience and understanding and meditation. And when the deities came down and recognized that, they praised the Buddha for his greatness and understanding that there is suffering in life, and he understood how to overcome it, and he understood how to live in a state of nirvana. So it's a wonderful sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya and the Deva Samyutta. Well, I think it's the first book or the second book of the Samyutta Nikaya. And there are several stories like that where the Buddha was sick. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, we read about the Buddha being sick and getting well, and recognizing that, as an 80-year-old man, it was time for him to pass into his parinibbana. And we read about him getting sick after his last meal. And yet he was sick and he had to lay down and he couldn't walk, and yet he did not suffer. And that is what we all try to learn, is how to live life without suffering. And by doing so, we learn what nirvana is. So the key to understanding how to alleviate suffering is, of course, to understand impermanence. And the Buddha often taught that when we meditate, we should meditate on the subject of impermanence. When I do a breathing meditation practice, my breathing meditation practice is simply to follow the breath, but I recognize that impermanent thoughts continually arise in my head, continually distract me from my concentration. And when I recognize those, I recognize them as impermanent and then return to my breathing practice. And so that in and of itself is learning impermanence. And as we learn impermanence, we gain wisdom and insight into our own existence and into the existence of others, and in how to alleviate our own suffering, because we recognize its impermanence. So as we meditate, again, I ask you to follow your breath. And as you follow your breath, allow yourself to, those thoughts that come in, don't dwell on them. There was a great Zen master who said, when the thought comes into your head, just don't invite it to sit down and have tea. It will come, and let it go out the other side, so to speak, just as though the door was open. So there's a front door to your mind and a back door to your mind, and just allow that thought to pass through and continue your focus. As long as we don't allow those thoughts to sit and have tea, then we recognize their impermanence, and we're able to continue our meditative concentration practice. So with that, we will begin our meditation practice for tonight. Led by the bells, of course, and we will meditate for 30 minutes, and then we will end with the bodhicitta prayer. So I invite you to enjoy your meditation tonight, and we'll recite the bodhicitta prayer in 30 minutes. Thank you for meditating with me tonight. As we do each night, we will end the night with the reading of the bodhicitta prayer. The bodhicitta prayer. With a wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Enthused by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind for full awakening, for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain and dispel the miseries of the world. Again, thank you very much for meditating with me tonight, and I hope you'll join me again tomorrow night as we continue our daily practice. Good night.